Imagine a world where your own government is conducting experiments on you without your knowledge. You are drinking your morning coffee, but you don't know that it has been spiked with a terrifying hallucinogenic drug just to see if it drives you insane. This is not the plot of a dystopian sci-fi movie. This is a brutal truth that happened on American soil in the 1950s and 60s, when the world's most powerful intelligence agency, the CIA, tried to hack the human mind. They wanted to create a super soldier who would feel no pain, or a spy who could be made to do anything against their will. The name of this secret project was MKUltra. It is a chapter that the CIA still wants to erase from the pages of history. The story begins right after World War II, when the world was divided into two camps, America versus the Soviet Union. The Cold War began. In this war, not only bombs or guns were used, but psychological weapons were also being deployed. During the Korean War in the early 1950s, strange reports began to reach America. American prisoners of war, POWs, were appearing in public praising communists and confessing to war crimes they had never committed. The American military and intelligence agencies were stunned. They began to believe that the Soviets and Chinese must have discovered some secret brainwashing technique. They were using some drug or technique that could break down a person's willpower. Panic spread in Washington. The CIA chiefs thought, if they can do it, we must be able to do it too, and we have to do it better than them. The search began for a new kind of weapon, a weapon that could not be seen, but which could control the human mind. April 13, 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles signed a top-secret document. Project MKUltra was officially born. The purpose of this project was the research and development of chemical, biological, and radiological methods to alter human behavior. In plain words, to create mind control drugs. The responsibility for this project was given to a strange character in the CIA's Technical Services Division. His name was Sidney Gottlieb. His colleagues called him the Dirty Trickster or the Poison Wizard. Gottlieb was a brilliant biochemist, but he had no morals. He believed that anything was justified for the sake of national security. Under his leadership, MKUltra quickly turned into a massive and uncontrolled monster. Gottlieb's main interest was a new and powerful drug, LSD. It was a type of psychedelic drug that could completely change a person's perception of reality. Gottlieb believed that LSD could be the key that could unlock the secret doors of the human mind. He began researching LSD frantically. He ordered CIA officials to buy all the LSD available in the world so that the enemy could not get it. But Gottlieb was not satisfied with just lab experiments. He needed live human beings, guinea pigs. And he decided that these guinea pigs would be ordinary Americans who would never know that they were part of a terrifying experiment. Sidney Gottlieb and his team needed to know how LSD would affect a person in a real-world situation, especially if the person did not know they had taken a drug. They needed to know if a spy could be dosed with LSD during a meeting and be forced to reveal secrets. To find out, Gottlieb started bringing LSD to parties and meetings. He would secretly slip the drug into the drinks of his colleagues and observe their reactions. It was a twisted game for him, but it had deadly consequences. In November 1953, Gottlieb organized a retreat for CIA scientists and Army researchers at a secluded lodge in Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. Among them was Dr. Frank Olson, an expert in biological warfare. On the second night of the retreat, after dinner, Gottlieb secretly added a large dose of LSD to a bottle of Cointreau. Frank Olson and several others drank it. Soon, the room plunged into chaos. The men began to hallucinate. Some laughed uncontrollably. Others became terrified. Frank Olson had the worst reaction of all. He fell into a deep, dark psychosis. He became incredibly paranoid. He believed that the CIA was trying to kill him. Ironically, he was not entirely wrong. Even after the drug wore off days later, Olson remained in a state of panic. He told his wife he wanted to resign. Gottlieb realized that Olson had become a liability. He was a man who knew too many state secrets, and now his mind was unstable. Gottlieb took Olson to New York City, ostensibly for psychiatric help. They checked into the Statler Hotel. On the night of November 28, 1953, Frank Olson plummeted from the window of his 13th floor room to his death on the sidewalk below. The CIA immediately covered up the incident. They told Olson's family that he had committed suicide due to job stress. It took 22 years for the truth to come out, that Frank Olson was unknowingly drugged by his own government days before his death. His death was the first known casualty of MKUltra. But Frank Olson's death did not stop Sidney Gottlieb. In fact, he expanded his experiments. He wanted to test how drugs could be used in field conditions outside the sterile environment of a lab. This led to one of the most bizarre and unethical sub-projects of MKUltra, known as Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA set up safe houses in San Francisco and New York City. These houses were decorated like brothels. The agency hired prostitutes on their payroll. Their job was to lure unsuspecting men, often tourists or businessmen, back to the safe house for sex. Once inside, the men would be offered a drink. Unbeknownst to them, the drink was spiked with a heavy dose of LSD. The rooms in these safe houses were fitted with two-way mirrors. Behind these mirrors sat CIA agents, often sipping martinis, watching the events unfold. They would take notes as the unwitting Johns began to lose their minds under the combined influence of drugs and sexual arousal. It was voyeurism disguised as national security research. The CIA knew that these men would never go to the police. They were doing something immoral or embarrassing, and they would be too ashamed to report that they had gone crazy in a brothel. They were the perfect victims. MKUltra was not just about LSD. It was a massive umbrella project with over 149 sub-projects, many funded through front organizations at universities and hospitals. Gottlieb and the CIA were looking for any way to break the human mind. They funded experiments where patients in mental hospitals were subjected to electroshock therapy at levels dozens of times higher than normal. They experimented with sensory deprivation, locking people in dark, soundproof tanks for days until they started hallucinating without drugs. They tried a technique called psychic driving, where patients were forced to listen to looped tape recordings of insults or commands for hours or even days in an attempt to erase their personality and build a new one. The targets were almost always people who couldn't fight back: prisoners, mental patients, drug addicts, and even children. They were treated not as humans, but as expendable materials in the Cold War against communism. For nearly 2 decades, Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA operated in the shadows, their horrific experiments known only to a select few. But in the early 1970s, the political climate in America began to change. The Watergate scandal had shaken the public's trust in government, and investigative journalists were starting to dig deep into the dark corners of intelligence agencies. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms, sensing that the tide was turning and fearing a congressional investigation, gave a devastating order. He ordered the destruction of all files and records related to MKUltra. It was a massive cover-up. Thousands of pages of documents detailing years of human experimentation were shredded and burned. Helms hoped that by destroying the paper trail, he could bury the secrets of MKUltra forever. And for a while, it seemed to work. But the truth has a way of surfacing. In December 1974, journalist Seymour Hersh published a bombshell article on the front page of the New York Times. The article alleged that the CIA had been conducting massive illegal intelligence operations against American citizens, including experiments with drugs. This report caused an uproar in Washington. It led to the formation of 2 major investigation committees: the Rockefeller Commission, appointed by the President, and the Church Committee, appointed by the Senate. These committees were tasked with investigating the abuses of the U.S. intelligence agencies. During these investigations, some of the MKUltra documents that had escaped destruction were discovered. These documents were mostly financial records, but they painted a terrifying picture of what had been going on. They revealed the existence of sub-projects, the funding of universities and prisons for research, and the use of drugs like LSD. Sidney Gottlieb, the poison wizard, was called to testify before Congress. He appeared, but he had been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. He admitted to his role in the experiments, but showed little remorse, claiming that it was all done in the name of national security against the communist threat. The revelations about MKUltra shocked the world. It was a betrayal of the public trust on an unimaginable scale. It showed that the government was willing to sacrifice the well-being and even the lives of its own citizens in its paranoid pursuit of power. In 1975, as a result of the investigations, President Gerald Ford issued an executive order banning the U.S. government from conducting experiments on human subjects without their informed consent. It was a direct response to the horrors of MKUltra. But for the victims, justice was slow and incomplete. The family of Frank Olson, who died after being drugged by Gottlieb, finally learned the truth about his death more than 2 decades later. They received a personal apology from President Ford and a financial settlement from the government. Other victims, many of whom never even knew they were part of an experiment, were left to deal with the psychological scars on their own. Some suffered from lifelong mental health issues, flashbacks, and paranoia as a result of the drugs and techniques used on them. Today, Project MKUltra stands as a grim reminder of the dark side of the Cold War and the dangers of unchecked government power. It is a story that sounds too horrifying to be true, but the scattered documents and the broken lives left behind prove that it was all too real. It is the story of a time when the government waged a secret war, not just against foreign enemies, but against the very minds of its own people.